So that's a picture of the radiant barrier that was stapled up as a retrofit. And you just staple it to the bottom of the rafters. And that's insulation that has since been installed. But that's a fairly inexpensive way of doing it. Here's another one. This one is like a foil with, and you know it's got a lot of perforations in it. That's to, if moisture needs to breathe through it, it can. But it's pretty well vented up there, so that's a radiant barrier. Okay, I don't know what else I'm showing here. All right, let's see, what else do we want to talk about? Whoops.
You don't necessarily put the foam board up against the deck. You can put it on the rafters all the way across.
Exactly, it can be on the bottom, the radiant barrier can be on the bottom of the decking or up against the decking. And if I were building a new roof, I would definitely get it to where it's already installed on the decking. That's such a nice way of doing it and really adds so little cost. Okay, let's go up a little.
You don't use that radiant barrier if you're going to put some foam.
That is correct. You never want to spray foam against it because the radiant barrier has to have a gap. If it touches something, then it sort of negates its effectiveness. So it has to not be touching something. So you could say it needs an airspace. I forgot who asked me this. There was something about, I was going to show you a detail about moisture detail that I wasn't going to cover this day, but it's too important. And this is a way back before we had fiber cement. Okay, I'll say this up front. Fiber cement siding is amazing. It's pretty hard to kill. I mean, it's pretty hard to rot that stuff. But if you use any kind of real wood siding or if you want to make the paint last longer on your fiber cement, you can do this approach, which is, I built this building. It's got house wrap as the weather-resistant barrier. And everywhere there was a stud, I put about an 1/8 inch furring strip. And there's a nice little detail you can do at the bottom where you take, let's say, 8 inches of insect screen and you staple 4 inches on first, then you put the strips, then you fold the other part up. So you're kind of making a screen in each of these cavities. Does that make any sense to you? And you fold that up, and then you put the lap siding. And I built this building, and I used the cheapest siding ever created by man. What do you think that was? What product was that? Masonite, exactly. We call it the spam of wood products. Masonite is just sawdust and whatever they fell in the hopper. But I back primed the siding, and when you back prime siding and you provide an airspace, you get, I'm going to say, at least double the life of the paint. And it's because, if moisture is trying to push through, it has this breathing space behind it. Does that make any sense? So that's one of the really good details. Now, as a water shedding surface, there's really 3 or 4 good materials that we like. One of them is house wrap. Another one that can work pretty well is felt. It's been around for a long time. Lap it. This is another product that does the same effect. It creates a gap. It's almost like a Brillo pad. It's a little plastic textured thing that pulls in this case, cedar shakes off of it. And there's a company that, I may have a picture of this, that makes this, already attached to house wrap. It's called Home Slicker, and they actually make it already attached to house wrap. So this is getting what we call, generically what we're trying to get is a drainage plane. It's called a drainage plane. It's water shedding surface and a gap. If you think about that, any cladding that has a water shedding surface and a gap, and the water shedding surface in this case is the felt, the gap is created by this Brillo pad, that's going to really, really help the cladding. It's going to really help the wall assembly. It's good for drying in any direction. So that's a really good detail.
Like if it was a sweat.
Pretty much. We did the same thing behind brick walls. Brick cladding is a tremendously effective, durable, sustainable cladding material. It's been around for a long time. Felt's been overlapped. Flashing's been tucked behind the felt. We put the water shedding surface. There's a gap. And they're talking a mortar net here because today masons don't know how to use the right amount. I don't know if they do that here, but in Georgia, they pretty much fill up the gap. That's the problem. So this net is supposed to kind of break up the mortar that drips down. And then also these openings. What do you call these openings every 2 feet? Now, should you caulk those for energy efficiency? Yeah. seen it done, but don't do that. So that's a water get out. But again, the cladding and the drainage surface and the gap. Synthetic stucco got a really bad rap because they didn't, in some of the manufacturers, they did not put a drainage plane on it. Synthetic stucco with a drainage plane is a brilliant cladding. It's a great system. It's got to have a drainage plane. So anytime you put a drainage plane, even fiber cement, I mean, I admit, we've built buildings where we just put the fiber cement right over the house wrap, and that's what most people do. But the drainage plane never is a bad thing, particularly on real wood siding. Does that make sense, what we're talking about here? Okay, that's probably enough. The other, I just thought this was a funny picture because they couldn't decide what color the sheathing ought to be, but and these are really ugly. I mean, but the skin of foam board, if you do it right and you seal the seams, can also be a good drainage surface. You know what I'm talking about? The skin of that can be a very good drainage surface. Foam board. Foam board costs more than house wrap, but if you think about it as instead of house wrap, I'm going to wrap it with foam board, you will increase the R value of the walls. And that will help, that will definitely help. It will reduce moisture condensation problems. It'll be more efficient. I'm not saying that's a good picture. I'm just saying it's a funny picture. So a lot of bad holes in that sheathing.
Foam board too, Mike, you get a continuous insulation versus stud being uninsulated.
Say it one more time, John.
If you use
Yes.
foam over your sheathing.
Yeah, you get a thermal break. Exactly right. You get a thermal break, and that's a good thing. Let me try. I was having a hard time finding this the other day. There's another product. Has anybody heard this product? It's called Zip System.
You say zip?
Yeah.
Yes. Any of the contractors?
That's a big multifamily project we're working on in Atlanta that's in the Earthcraft program, and you can see they've gone pretty crazy with their photovoltaics on the roof. But this is the Zip System I'm talking about, where I've got samples of it. It's like OSB that's sort of been dipped into, if you will, a bubbly wax, and it's sort of like saying the felt is already applied to the OSB. And then they have what I like about this is it's very deliberate of teaching people, yeah, that gap needs to be sealed, right? In new homes, can you flip the light on for a second? I'm going to try to find a sample. In new homes, that's good, he's got it. And we're going to keep looking at a couple more things. New homes, the primary air barrier is the sheathing. In yours and my home, we got cladding, we may not be able to get to it. Our primary best bet is in the walls is probably go from the inside. Right. But from a new home standpoint, if you get the sheathing sealed tight, you don't need to worry about outlets and things like that. You get the sheathing done right. I really like this system because it's a very deliberate connection. Has anybody seen this before? Have anybody built with this? I like this. I think it's got a plant in Tennessee and one in Georgia, and they make a brown color one for the roof. That, you know, I think it's a neat concept. So let's see what else we got here. What other questions we had? Do you want to talk about spray foam right now? Is this a good time? I keep grabbing the mouse. Let's talk about. Okay, so there's kind of, that is probably a picture of bad. There's kind of two kinds of foams. There's the squishy kind and the rigid kind. That's a fancy way of saying the low density foam is the standard, you know, certain, I got a sample of it. And then the rigid kind is the one that you can knock your fingers on it. And this is the squishy one. And this is the rigid one. You can eat this one. You probably hurt yourself on this one. Interestingly enough, this is just purely trivia, but this actually is the only insulation product that actually makes a building stronger. It actually has structural capacity. No other insulation can claim that. They're both good. They have pros and cons compared to each other. They both cost about the same. In our market, we find closed cells a little bit more expensive. Is that what you're seeing too, John? But not a whole lot different. In general, I'd probably use open cell on the roof line and the walls. I'd probably use closed cell under the floor, like on a crawl space if I was going to do the floor. Just because this is a low permeability. This is a high permeability. So that's one thing. Water vapor performs differently. I don't think either one is necessarily a problem. Like I said, this one had some structure, so if I'm building on the coast or worried about a hurricane, you know, don't tell me this doesn't make me feel better if this is sprayed in my roof line. It's going to make my whole assembly stronger. This one is an R value per inch that's comparable in a wall to fiberglass or cellulose. So you're going to get about an R13 in a wall cavity. That's what it is. It creates its own air barrier. Spray foams are an air barrier, whereas fiberglass, cellulose, those are not. Cellulose is close, but it's really technically not qualified as an air barrier. So that's one of the things about the foam, that it creates an air barrier. This does as well. To get about an R20, and I'm going to say that's the target number because typically they don't meet the prescriptive code with spray foam. It's too expensive. They're going for about an R20. Don't let them talk you into less. Don't, you know, that was my advice, is don't go less than R20 in the roof. R19, okay, fine, but that's about the target. This is going to take about 6 inches, 5, 6 inches to get an R20. This is maybe, I think it's, what is it, John, like 3.6, 3.7 per inch, something like that. This is almost double that. This is pushing R7 per inch. So you're looking at about 3 inches of this to get the equivalent R value. Be careful, because this is where people, you know, you shortchange me a ½ inch on this, yeah, you know, I'll sleep. But I'm down an R value or 2. But you shortchange me that on this. This is much more crucial to get the right depth. So that's one thing that we always wear. You want consistent coverage, and that is something that is not always done. So here's a couple pictures. Any other thoughts or questions on there? Yeah.
I've had some people try to do the foam in a roof or in an attic.
Uh-huh.
And of course, air code would require R38 for that application.
They're going to need to do a trade-off.
I know it air seal, but I can't unless they do some other
Yeah,
type of
and we're going to, you're absolutely right. They are not meeting prescriptive code, and that's okay, but it's up to them to show you that they did a trade-off. So that the only other big change was the, and this happened last year or this year, I can't even remember. I think it was maybe in this year. They changed the rules about when it needs a smoke ignition barrier, smoke barrier, and it's more tricky today. A lot of the closed cells don't necessarily have to have it, but the open cells typically do. IECC keeps saying we're about there, but they're not quite, to my knowledge. You may know more about it. And I cannot honestly keep it all straight, so just know that you may have to, depending on the situation, you may be required to coat the underside of the open cell with a coating that would add to the cost. I mean, that's going to add to the cost, so I think you have to be realistic about that. So here he is spraying closed cell, and you know, again, trying to get good coverage. Here it is along the roof line. Again, I hope that part right there, I'm a little suspect. Is he really giving me 3 inches? You know, if that's what I'm supposed to be getting. I don't know, but you know, that's the only concern I have. But if it's done right, this is a great product. I'm not sure what that's, I think that was a case where someone had a bad mixture and it was pulling off. Here it's being done against the concrete wall and on the outside even. So I think these came from Texas. I think these is where those came from. So pretty good application for it in there, trying to seal that joint and get good thermal break at the steel girder there. This is a coworker of mine spraying, using a foam gun and sealing the joints of the sheathing on an attic knee wall, and then they'll come back with insulation. So she's making that airtight, not spraying the whole thing. That's another thing, is to try to use foam for what it's really good for and use a cheaper insulation. So some people do that flash and bat. Well, they'll spray a real thin, they'll coat the whole thing with the thinnest layer they can spray and come back with less expensive insulation. And probably the best thing here would be to put, I don't know exactly what's going on here, but put bats and then put foam board on top of that. That's the best approach. I'm not sure what.
We recommend that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I keep grabbing that mouse. So that was closed cell foam. Here are some pictures of open cell. So I put this picture up just to kind of show you. This is a whole community that was built over a decade ago in Pine Mountain, Georgia, where Callaway Gardens is. And they, I only show this because that is a fake gable vent. That's nothing more than architectural detail. It's not really a vented assembly. And this is back when foam was really new and people were like, what are you doing? And you could walk into a closet and go, wow, it's not hot in here. And it looks like the inside of an alien stomach, but kind of cool. But the big advantage, of course, is that you're getting your ductwork inside. Here's another picture where they foamed it. And then, you know, this space is really, you do not have to supply air to this space. It's considered indirectly conditioned. You can if you want to, but it's considered inside the thermal envelope. You do not have to directly condition it. It's indirectly conditioned. Here is a bad installation, just so we're kind of saying nothing is foolproof. What do you think happened here? I think somebody's on it. It looks like a bad mix. If the substrate is real humid, I think that can be a problem. You sound like you may know some of this. I know that you can definitely run into problems with poor installation of spray foam. Kind of an ugly looking duct system, but at the same time, all inside the thermal envelope. So you don't have to supply air. This temperature in this space will be very close to the temperature below the drywall, below the ceiling. Does everybody get that? The question I also get on a retrofit is, should I take all the old insulation out? And I would say, from an energy standpoint, it doesn't matter that you leave it in there. I would say take it out, though. Why? Why would I want to take all this dusty, fibrous? It's from a pollutant standpoint. Yeah, air quality. Yeah, I would get it all out. That would be my suggestion. Just take it all out and then foam the roof line on a retrofit. And by the way, we haven't got into combustion safety, but this equipment cannot be an 80% furnace. You cannot use the air around this to burn with. So if it's a heat pump, you're fine, or you need to go with a high efficiency furnace. It looks like this one is a heat pump. I don't see anything else on it. So let's see. And you want to put, spray foam houses tend to be tight, so you want to put ventilation on. Here's a picture spraying foam underneath on a floor. This is where closed cell has, to me, a slight edge because it's also a vapor retarder. But I think every crawl space needs plastic, so that's the missing link in this picture. They have not, I presume, are going to do it. But what I like about this is it won't fall down, will it? Now, I would also recommend that they not vent this crawl. I would, even though the insulation's up there, I would close up the crawl space and not vent it because you'll actually cut down on issues of like pipes freezing and things like that. So you have to sort of give this consideration. I thought this was pretty funny. What? Remember we said the house is a system, right? Well, you know, my job is to spray foam, right? But there's a fan. It looks like I shouldn't cover that. So you see the problem there, hopefully. So, okay. Retrofit on commercial buildings. Commercial buildings have notorious problems with drop ceilings. And someone did, I'll be careful. Someone might hypothetically have done something stupid like put a bat on top of one of these. We're on the first floor, right? Is there a floor above us? Okay, so if I push this up, if there's a fiberglass bat on top of this, whoever the architect is, we're going to put them against the wall. No, I mean, this was legal in the code for too long. It's been illegal in the code for over a decade, and yet people continue to do this. This is not an air barrier. This is not complete coverage of insulation, right? So this is a great retrofit, to me, is to foam the inside and then come back with a fake ceiling. That's perfectly fine. So that's what I recommend in a lot of commercial buildings. Okay, I think just more of the same. Nice picture. By the way, sometimes we get the question, should I, in some cases, foam here instead of here because it might be less material? And I would say it depends. If you do not have ductwork up in the attic, we call that foam in the lid. I might consider foam in the lid if I didn't have any ductwork up in here and I really never go up in there and in other words, I'm going to make a really good igloo cooler top. Maybe I would consider that. But a new home, that's a great place to run ductwork, I'm going to do the roof line. Okay? Let's see, more of the same. Oh, this is kind of funny. They were trying to work on a mixture of this for your home and my home where they'd sort of pour in a slow-acting foam and it would fill the cavity and you know, it's a neat concept, but they're kind of still working on it. So they're still working on it. So, but really, I pump cellulose in my walls. That was what I was going to show you next. on a retrofit, if you have an old house, you can, that was a buddy of mine in the picture, but really it was my wife and I did most of this work. We just went around on our clapboard siding and took a Sawzall and cut the nails above and below a strip of siding, and it either stayed in place with a shim or it just came out. But there you go. There's your cavity. There's no sheathing here. And I pumped cellulose, and I'm using a piece of fiberglass bat as a filter because I'm pumping in air and cellulose, and air has to get out. This was really pretty easy. I just sort of pushed it all the way up, start at the top, start filling it. You can tell when it's packed. You pull it down a few inches, pack some more, pull it down. You can do a stud cavity in about a minute. And it was very helpful to have two people. My wife was loading the hopper with bags, and I was pumping it full. And you can see I was learning. I sprayed the yard a few times, but it was pretty cheap. It cost me about $100, which I got a good deal. Somebody loaned me their blowing machine and sold me the insulation at cost, but I did all the labor. But the cost to insulate was pretty easy. I did above and below windows. I did some, I patched a few places with fiberglass. I did some cavities from the inside. The smartest thing we did was we did this before we moved in and painted everything. But I will say this, anybody ever tried to drill through plaster and lath? I drilled 10 holes and I went through like 3 hole saws and 2 drills or something like that. So it was not a very easy way to get through, but it was very easy to patch when it was all done. And there's a picture in new construction. I like cellulose. I think it's a great product. It's very sustainable. It's almost all recycled content. It's got borate in it, so it won't burn. Borate, bugs hate borate. They typically will damp spray it in, and it'll stick. It might mix a little like Elmer's glue to make it stick, but if it's dense packed in while it's damp, once it dries, you cover it up. It has nowhere to settle. Whereas my other approach, I did the best I could, but I was worried it might have settled some. I actually took an IR camera 2 years ago, and after 10 years, it had not settled, so I was really happy about that. But
What is the R value for that?
that's a great question. So pretty much every insulation in a 2x4, and when I say every standard fiberglass, open cell foam, the squishy one, or cellulose, you're going to get an R13 in a cavity. And that's, some people are like, oh, you can buy this really expensive fiberglass and you'll get glass bat and you'll get R15, or the only one that you could really arguably get more in is this one, because this is truly a 7 per inch. But generally they only want to spray 2 inches, so they leave room for wires and stuff like that. So it's generally, in the cavity, that's what you're looking at for a 2x4 cavity. Now, if you go 2x6, you can obviously do more, but like John was saying, foam board starts to become really better for the assembly. Continuous foam is better for the assembly. One strategy we like to do, and this will make your walls a little thicker, but is to wrap your house for structure with OSB, and then start in the corner and come 2 feet off the corner, not 4 feet, because you got a joint at 4 feet. We would be outside, but put a 2-foot strip of foam and then go 4 foot. So in other words, you're staggering the joints. The OSB joint is here, the foam board joint is here. You're inherently getting a staggered, more airtight assembly. That's a nice, we call that oversheathing, and that actually can work really well.
What inch do you use, Mike, on your foam board outside? Do you use 1/2 inch or 1 inch?
Whatever you're trying to do. In my climate, I think a 1/2 inch goes a long way. You're a little colder here, so I mean, I look at it as I got one shot to build this wall before I cover it up with cladding, and I would probably look at, and I'm half considering this on one of my walls just for the heck of it, is ripping it off, putting foam board, and then putting a drainage plane gap, and then residing it, and of course it's going to screw up all my trim details. So if I have to get the architect employed on that one, so that's a pipe dream project.
And we got, somebody new homes, if you want to see this application, Habitat, their last house we talked about, Thanks to,
Yeah.
did OSB sheathing. Instead of zip, they did a regular OSB.
And then oversheathed it, yeah.
Oversheathed it.
And
So you see the house on one side is a zip with the green.
yeah. Oh.
Checkerboard. Then next to it is the blue.
Oh, cool.
Dow is a partner.
Dow gives free blue board to have it. Yeah, I mean, We built habitat houses. We built some in Atlanta where we built some real high performance homes. We built some homes in the year 2000 that basically the average heating and cooling bill per month was $15. That was the average bill, $15 for heating and cooling. And we built a 2x6 wall. We used advanced framing. I think it was 24 on centers. We ran OSB with lead-in bracing. Well, we did like OSB in the corners, and we infilled, and then we staggered another layer. So most of it was R5, some was R3. Okay, any other big questions on this? Let me see. What else did we talk about that you sparked my mind? Okay, I tell you what. Cannot lights. I think.
Everything you see now is insulation contract airtight. It's called IECC.
Yeah.
And it's used itself like that's the logic you want to use. Cost is basically the same. Our code people may say use that or what do you think about
If
it?
you're gonna be here after lunch, I've got the slide of those. So, airtight insulation contact labels on the right.
Mm-hmm.
Things I've covered in eliminating the leakage.
You flip that one on right there. Let's go back to this for now. We might come over here in a
We
sec.
have a couple more people join us.
Oh, welcome. Yeah. Sure. Please. Thank you for coming.
Installation person back here, so he knows everything about installation.
What's your name?
I'm Jerry.
Hi, Jerry. Welcome.
And then Tommy's here, Tommy Wright Tracy's husband. Now, Tommy heads up the finance department here, so they just moved into a house. She wants comfort. He wants energy savings. He's
Got
the
it.
dollar man here.
Got it. Got it. Well, you can have it all. You can have it all. Nice to meet you, Tom. Thanks for coming. Let's see, I hate to do this, but would you mind taking that light down? And what did I do with my clicker? RUNNOFT. Can anybody? Thank you. So I did also want to show you a couple slides. We talked about ventilation briefly. Sorry, I jumped here, somewhere. So I just want to mention this. The theory on ventilation is, of course, you want to build a tight house and then provide some air for people living in the house. You can do it in three ways. You can suck air out of the house, you can pump air into the house, or you can do both at the same time. And the exhaust strategy is one that I don't really recommend in the Southeast. It's one where they might work in Chicago or something where you're always keeping your building under a slight negative. I wouldn't do it here because of humidity. So I would either favor the balanced or the positive one. So the balanced one, that you would use an ERV. I mentioned that, an energy recovery ventilator. And it's this magic box that has two air streams. One is fresh air coming in, the other is stale air going out. But the stale air going out is at room temperature, and the fresh air coming in might be hot or cold or humid. So the idea is that you transfer energy, you precondition this black line before it hits the house with the energy of the outgoing air. And a big one, a real one, is a couple $1,000, but like I said, Panasonic makes a little one that's 30 or 40 CFM that you might put two of them in your house, and I found those pretty cheap. And that's the Panasonic one right there. It only has two ports, so it doesn't mix the air as well. The other way that we do it, this is probably the way most of the Earthcraft houses do it, is you've got your return and your supply. They just simply add a 6-inch duct to the outside with a motorized damper in it. And the motorized damper has a controller that I do have. And it's not expensive. I mean, we're talking a 6-inch duct, the motorized damper, and the controller, $250. That's what we're typically, in that ballpark. I hate to add prices because I'll be wrong. But then here you're the homeowner, and you say, look, I want 15 minutes of ventilation every hour. And so what this thing does is it watches the air handler. And if the thermostat had called for heating or cooling, let's say, it's a cold day, it says, okay, I'm going to open up the motorized damper for 15 minutes while it's running and making heat. I'm going to mix in a little bit of outside air. probably on the order of 50 CFM. That's about what a typical house needs. I can give you the formula for it, but it's probably in the neighborhood of 50 CFM. And you simply introduce that air to the mixed air from the house. And so when it operates, the house goes under a very slight positive pressure. I can kind of demo that right here. Remember the little house we were using? Okay, so I'll turn on my air handler. The ducts aren't leaky. The pressure on the house right now, what would you say it is?
Pretty balanced.
Pretty balanced, right? So if I do a little hand waving and run a duct from the return to the outside, I can make this happen. You notice what's the pressure right now on the house? It's a little bit positive, right? I'm trying to just do a little bit. And here's some numbers. Putting 1,000 in, taking 950 out, 50 CFM of makeup air. Okay? So the house is slightly positive. I live in a humid climate. I kind of like that idea. I'm keeping moisture at bay. That kind of makes sense. By the way, we do this on huge percentage of commercial buildings. This is not something I invented. You pretty much have to do ventilation in commercial buildings, and we haven't quite gotten there yet, but we will eventually in residential buildings. So that's really what we're doing. That's all it is. And the idea with the controller, what's so great about the controller, is it says, look, if it's really cold, I don't want you to give me more than 15 minutes of ventilation. After 15 minutes, shut the motorized damper off and then just go back and recirculate if you still need it. So it prevents overventilating on a hot or cold day. On a mild day, the thermostat might not ever call for heating or cooling. So on a mild day, what it does is it watches the clock and it says, hey, 45 minutes went by. I got no run time. Open the motorized damper, turn on just the blower, and circulate air. So you get a mixing of outside air as well. Get it?
Yeah.
It really does work, and it's really pretty inexpensive to do. So if anybody freaks out about building a house too tight, well, number one, I always say, we actually will put this device in your house that will allow you to make your house leakier. Let me go through. I'll put one in every room, and you can see out of them. So it's pretty easy to make a tight house leaky. You just open a window. It's hard to make a leaky house tight. I mean, that's what we do in the weatherization world. So, okay, I think that was the big thing I wanted to mention. All right, and we covered all that. So the code. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I think Don's going to cover it, but suffice it to say, the code is the minimum. It's asking us to do a lot of stuff that generally has a pretty cost-effective benefit to us. Here's the way it's laid out. Chapter 4 is basically the guts of the code. It is literally 4 pages. This whole book boils down to 4 pages that actually matter. And if you want, I'll give them to you, but don't tell the ICC that. You can actually go to the ICCsafe.org website and you can download the pages. It just doesn't look like it does in the book, but you can download the content for free. And they were pretty nice. They would usually let us print it. What kind of buildings are we talking about? What does the word residential mean? It means single family. It means one and two family. It means multifamily, 3 stories and under, what we call low-rise multifamily. If it's multi-story and up, if it's 4 stories and up, it becomes a commercial, and it goes to Chapter 5. And actually, when you adopt this code, you get Chapter 5. You also get ASHRAE. Okay, that's easy for me to say. You also pick up ASHRAE 95. So there's really 2 commercial codes that you get, but we're not going to talk about that today. And there are a couple exemptions written in. If you build a building basically what we like to say is all new work needs to meet code. Okay, so you build a brand new building, everything needs to meet code. If you build a building with no conditioning, I'm from North Georgia, we call that a barn or a shed. You do not have to insulate. So I don't know how you build a brand new historic building, but if you renovate a historic building, they are exempt. They can, it's mainly to keep the windows probably. Doesn't mean you can't do a renovation without making a historic building better. We've done that a lot. If you put almost no conditioning in it, and that's so little, it's almost not worth mentioning, then you're exempt. But generally, most homes need to meet code. How does it deal with alterations, additions, and repairs? Once again, new work needs to meet code. There's a couple little exceptions. If you add storm windows, the code does not kick in. If you got a busted window and you fix it, the code does not kick in. But what if you got a busted window and you decide to replace it and the other 3 next to it? What do you think? Replacement glass has to meet code. Yeah, the code kicks in. Okay. And if you do a renovation, let's say you tear into your wall and you're surprised and there's some insulation in there. It's probably disgusting, first of all, but in theory, if it's filling the cavity, it might be an R11 bat, but you're allowed to leave it if it fills the cavity. And if you do a renovation, but you say, I'm not going to tear into the cavity, even though I know it's not insulated, you're not obligated. If you don't mess with it, you don't have to bring it up to code. That's kind of good short. I don't know if that's how I always simply describe it. If you mess with it, bring it to code. If you don't, Okay. Questions on that? Chapter 2 of this book has some great definitions. My favorite is they defined a code official. I thought that was really good. You have a definition. We know what you are now. This is the climate zone map that is applicable. This is actually a big change over previous iterations of the code. It's much simpler. There's only, if you ignore Miami, there's really only about 6 or so climate zones. And I only work in zones 2, 3, and 4. That's my rule. I would go visit Boone over here, but y'all are technically 5. But that's kind of where we focus our work is in this climate zone. And Tennessee is almost all zone 4, like North Georgia. Memphis is zone 3. So some of my slides will say zone 3 on them, but mostly zone 4. Good? Okay. I'm going fast because I think we just want to knock it out. There's a requirement for a panel box certificate that I use the analogy if you pick up that box of cereal, well, it's not a box of cereal, but it's the nutritional label. That's really what this is. So what are the main ingredients? Here's an example of the house. A label doesn't save any energy, but a label does help communicate what's been done in the house. This label becomes a lot more important when you go to future versions of the code because it's a place where we can put the test results, the blower door and the duct test results. It's not required under this code, but it makes sense in the future. Okay, everybody good with this concept of the thermal envelope? Separates where you live, where you don't live. Got 2 parts, air barrier and insulation. So John, if you went into someone's house and it was 30 degrees outside and it was 72 inside, and you went up into the attic and it was 64 degrees in the attic, would that be good or bad?
Yes.
Yes.
If it's a vented attic and it's 64 degrees up there, what does that tell you is wrong right here?
We're heating the neighborhood.
Yes.
Heating Tennessee. It's saying it could be a problem with what? It could be leaks. It could be a problem with insulation coverage, or it could be both.
It could be really, really sunny outside and you have a black roof.
Hey, maybe. All right. The other thing I want to show, sorry, that question was for nighttime. I forgot to specify that. The other thing I want to show is, you are correct. I'll have to give you that one. This is a neat slide because it kind of tells you a little bit about. I like to use it. You're driving through a subdivision and you see 3 identical houses, and each house has chosen to define their thermal envelope in a different way. But they're all correct. In terms of the code, they're all okay. This is probably the most common one. This is the spray foam one, and this might be sort of in between. So let's take a look at the most common one. They're going to insulate the floor over the garage. They're going to insulate the wall. They're going to insulate the flat ceiling, the walls, the floor over the foundation, and the wall to the garage. Pretty conventional, right? R value-wise, we haven't covered this, but it's probably 38, 13, 19, 13, 19, 13. And don't worry if you didn't memorize that. That's okay. But that's pretty much it. 13 in the walls, 38 in the ceiling, 19 in the floors. Here, they came down with the walls, but they've included the basement or the crawl space as part of their conditioned envelope. They've sealed off here. They've come along the roof line here. They vaulted it, so it's a vaulted space, but they still have an attic space. So this one has a knee wall. Remember we said this is a particular problem area. And then finally, the last one over here, what did they do on the last one?
Well, they conditioned all the attic, including the knee wall.
Yeah, well, it's really not even a knee wall. It's just like an interior wall now, right? It's just conditioned space on all sides. So if you can imagine, each one of these houses has an air handler. And let me draw it on here. I'm going to just use a simple convention. There's a system up here labeled X and a system down here labeled Y. Okay. Okay. And which one is probably going to perform best? Example 1, 2, or 3? And which one's probably going to perform worse? 1. And why is that?
Well, because you've got part of your system in that attic space that's super hot in the summer and super cold in the winter, and the other part's in a conditioned area that's...
Well, it's not conditioned. It's a vented space, like a vented crawl space,
Yeah,
say. So you're outside the envelope in both cases, right?
Yeah.
You've sort of poked through, you know, if this is your 2-story house, you poke through up here and you poke through down here to put your equipment.
Yeah, can you get her to explain that to my
And you are amazing. That's excellent. So it turns out, and oddly enough, this one might actually be smaller equipment. Even though it's a bigger conditioned beer cooler, it's a smaller surface. I mean, it's a smaller load because the ducts are inside. So and this one, they kind of got it right, but really it would have been best if they had continued it all the way down. And if that's a great place to put an air handler and ductwork, but it's in this place. Knee walls are notoriously troublesome. There's blocking issues, which we kind of touched on. Okay, very good. The prescriptive code is a simple chart that says, do what I say and no one gets hurt. That's kind of what it is. It's a paint by numbers. It's a build exactly what this says, and you are in compliance with your insulation and windows. We still have some other things to do here, but insulation and window. We're in climate zone 4. Your windows, windows and door. Fenestration means windows and door. U factor, lower is better. So we want a low U factor. 0.40 is the maximum. We want lower than that. Double pane low E windows will hit that. Skylights, same kind of animal. You do not have a requirement for solar heat gain. That eventually changes in future versions of the code, but this was big when we went to this code in Georgia. This was a big deal for us because it pushed us to go to low E windows.
What is your solar heat gain?
Now it's 0.3.
0.3?
Yeah.
0.3
And,
for...
and we actually made it for statewide. Even though North Georgia is zone 4, we actually made it a state because we didn't want windows kind of cross the county line, and that was probably a really wide, and the distributors like that too because one window would work everywhere. So.
U value also 0.3?
3.5, I think, in North Georgia. In this code, it's a little different from this one, but not a whole lot. You would get it with basically the same window. Ceilings are 38, walls are 13. We'll talk about mass walls, floors 19, basements. We'll talk about those in a second. Basically, when you see this number for the basement wall, the first number 10 is if it's continuous on the inside. The second number 13 is if you stud up against it in cavity insulation. Same for crawl space walls. And slabs want about 2 inches of foam 2 feet down. We'll talk about what that is. So there's also a similar table that uses U factors for everything instead of R values, but that's mainly used for trade-offs. Okay, the next section of the code is actually where we kind of put the rules to all the stuff on that chart. And it's just sort of, I won't say it's best practice, it's like the correct practice. And some of these are pretty obvious. So for example, ceilings with attic. The answer is R38. As long as you build all your ceilings to R38, you pass prescriptive code. If you stray from that, you got to do a trade-off. That's what you were getting at earlier, Don. And this is another small thing, but these rulers, you know what, ever seen these before? They're supposed to be one for every 300 square feet. Now in Georgia, I'm sure I have one in there. In Georgia, here's what it looks like. Insulation ruler, insulation ruler, insulation. And then we had some guy that folded them up on the bottom, so I was like, I was really impressed. He knew which end to fold up. So, oh yeah, I know. So blown insulation is not without its issues. for code officials, you're probably looking at, I'm going to say in the neighborhood of 15 inches to get an R38, maybe more, 15, 16 inches of depth to get an R38. That's what you should be seeing. And I would say, by all means, take your tape measure and just do a spot check. Cellulose is probably what, John, like a 10 inches, 11, something, to get an R38? Somewhere in that ballpark. I can't remember. It should be written on the little card. If you want to do a trade-off, for spray foam like we saw, you would need to do this trade-off. And it's generally, if your windows are good, you probably have enough cushion in your windows to get by on that. If your windows are low enough, you're probably okay. But that's a requirement that the res check software, and if we get time, I'll demonstrate it. Let me see what else. Attic access. Okay, this is not, unfortunately, addressed in this issue of the code, but it did make it into later versions. So as a best practice, I'm going to put it in here for now. That infrared image, I think, tells the story, doesn't it? Remember John said, heat is like me? And this is an amazing statistic. If you have 1,000 square foot of attic and only 1% is not R30, in my example, R30, that will knock you down to effectively be an R23. If you have R38 and only 1% is not, it'll knock you down to an R28. It knocks effectively, it's like saying a continuous R23 is the same as R30 with a pull down stairs that's not insulated. It's because of that. So here's a couple ways of doing it. One is to do, I don't know if I had any samples of this stuff. They make all kinds of retrofit stuff for this, but I like this one for retrofit because there's like a separate foam door that comes underneath. And this one is only as good as the homeowner remembering to put it back. That's my issue with it. So there's a company in South Carolina called Marwin. They make it where the foam board is actually built into the door, which I think is a great idea. It's got a nice weather strip. It's $30 more than the regular pull-down stairs. Pretty good deal. That's what builders in Georgia do. I like this as a retrofit, though, because anything that the homeowner will run into if it's not closed, I think it's in your favor that they will put it back. Okay.
Here's what you guys do at your house. You attic tents?
We do attic tents because nobody wants to pay for a good job.
Yeah, and attic tents are, I have a sample out in the car, I think, but they're not they don't have much R value. They do help with air sealing, and they do help keep insulation from falling down, but they don't really have any R value much. They're 3. So I have seen people in the weatherization world in Georgia, they will take one of those and spray closed cell foam on top of it. And you got to put stuff on the zipper to protect it, but it sounds like you know that. It's not my favorite either. So I doubt anybody builds this, but a mass wall is someone building an above grade wall out of concrete or block. And it says essentially if you put the insulation on the outside, it's R5. If you put it on the inside or integral, it's R8. Excuse me, it's R13. Or if you stud it, it's R13. There is also, and I've shown you this because a log wall is considered a mass wall. A log wall will not meet prescriptive code. A log wall has to do a trade-off. And a res check is your friend for that. So it's particularly in this version of the code, it's pretty easy to make it pass. No one builds steel framing, but if you have steel framing, you got to use foam board. Basically, that's the bottom line. Floors, probably one of the most. Do people do underfloor insulation here? Do they usually do it? Do they do it wrong? So they do it wrong a lot where I live, or I think we've gotten better about it, but they still do it wrong. Or a lot of houses need to be fixed, I guess I'll say. So I'm not a big fan of underfloor fiberglass bats because there's too much gravity. But there's my floor joist, there's my subfloor, and the wrong place to put the insulation is here. And this is what we see a lot. People put string or chicken wire or something to hold it up. But this bat has no air barrier. Where's the air barrier?
Above.
Yeah, it's got to be up in contact with the subfloor. And so the wire staves, that's fine. I'd rather have a little compression that that doesn't fall down. I'd rather people put a wire stave every foot and compress it a lot, because at least I know it'll stay there. But that's a big problem with underfloor insulation. The code specifically says it's got to be up against the subfloor. But people do it wrong. So as a code official, that would be something I would definitely be getting people. I would really inspect that.
So it's required here in the state to have underfloor insulation, yes or no?
Yes, if that's an unconditioned space below it, then you do have to have it, unless you can show it with a trade-off, but you're probably going to have a hard time. Now, there are options. For example, on a basement, if you do the walls of the basement, you do not have to do the floor. And we're going to find that that actually is a good idea. So the answer is yes, if that's a floor over unconditioned space and that's your approach. If that's how you choose to define your envelope, you got to do it. If you choose to define your envelope as the walls of the basement, you do not have to do it. That's great.
Go, Mike mentioned the consistent cover.
Yeah.
And we do it when we teach middle schoolers, high schoolers, and here at college, we use the word CAT. And you know what CAT stands for? It's continuous and touching.
And touching. I like that.
If you touch the surface,
Yeah.
no gaps, no holes.
And it's really hard. I mean, honestly, it's hard. I got some great pictures. It's hard to make underfloor insulation work well, and just too many things fighting against you. One of them being subcontractors pulling it down. So, and the other being, like I said, too much gravity. So basement walls are different from mass walls. Mass walls are above grade. Basement walls, by definition, are heavy walls that are more than half below grade. So do y'all see this a lot, the stepped pour? Do you see that? We see that pretty common in Atlanta. Now the grade will probably come something like that on the outside. But the code in this version of the code does require this part of the concrete be insulated to R10. And it also insulate that. In my opinion, it's worth it. That's a really, really good building envelope decision. So for y'all's house, if you don't finish it, this is, what you don't want to do is just stud that part and insulate that and not do anything here. The code does not allow that. That does not meet prescriptive code. Ways to do, and let me specify here, this is an unfinished basement, but the walls are still part of the envelope. If it's going to be finished, what I would probably do, honestly, if you're going to finish it, I would probably use foam board, put furring strips, and put drywall on it. And I would use, I would actually spend a little more money and use paperless drywall. Do I have any samples of that? It's, you know that yellow stuff, the sheathing they use on a lot of commercial buildings, it's called Den's Glass Gold. Some of you code folks may. It's basically a gypsum board with a fiberglass facing. Well, they make the same product. I think it's called Den's Armor. It's more expensive than regular drywall, but it's great for a wet location. And you want to do everything you can to not let your basement get wet. But for a kitchen, bathroom, or basement, it's a really good consideration. It's a paperless drywall. You don't look as excited about it as I am, so that's it. Actually, fake your excitement.
I just never heard of it.
Yeah, Den's Armor, I think, is the name. I may have samples in there, but it's just a drywall that doesn't have any paper on it, and there's no food source for mold, which is really nice. So here is a great way to do it. They are using a cellulose bat. Do I have a sample of that? It's kind of cool. It's I'm never going to find it because I'm looking for it. It kind of looks like I've been pilfering props from too many places. But, oh well. Oh, here's the. Yeah, don't fly with this if I can help it, or else you just mess with their head. Let's check this luggage. The cellulose bat is pretty cool because it's almost like a cotton bat, and they make different thicknesses of it. I don't know how much it costs or how available it is, but you can just put it up. And I always thought if you're a drummer, that would be a good thing for your basement because it looks pretty acoustical. The other thing is this type of foam board, Thermax is the brand, is got the code rating to be left exposed. It can be left exposed. But I would probably go this one. It's the cheapest but still effective way of insulating an unfinished basement. And all it is, it's a vinyl-backed bat of insulation. And it comes in like a 50-foot long, 4-foot wide roll. And you can do it horizontally, like in that picture, or vertically. And you just tape the seams. You put shoot a couple Hilti nails into kind of with a washer to help hold it. And that is your cheap way of insulating the walls. It's the same insulation product that is in a Butler building, a metal building. It's the same kind of stuff you go into a metal building. It's that white perforated vinyl. It's not a vapor barrier. It allows moisture to dry through it. It's a great way to get R11 on your basement wall. And the advantage of doing the walls of the basement are your ducts and your air handler are inside the shell. I think we're losing our energy level on that, so let's push forward. So does that help you? So if you're going to finish your basement, I would look at an insulation product like this, or even white foam board like this. And I would look at drywall like that, just because there's no food source for mold. Do not put plastic in your concrete walls. Okay? If you're going to put plastic in the concrete walls, you really want it on the outside. That's what the waterproofing is supposed to do. Do not put it on the inside, because water vapor will get in and out of concrete. You kind of want to make sure your walls can dry to the inside if they need to on concrete. I have pictures over there somewhere of people that put plastic up in. All it does is it's a terrarium. It catches water behind it, and eventually that water comes down and rots out the sill plate. So you don't want that. Let the water vapor dry through. Yeah, Don.
I apologize, I may have missed this.
No, that's okay.
Did you cover about why insulate concrete walls? A concrete wall is a mass, and
I don't think I went in as much detail as you had actually mentioned to me, so thank you.
because I've had people that say, I don't need to insulate my floor, I don't need to insulate the basement walls. It's a big mass of concrete. It's the best insulation you can find.
You couldn't be more wrong. The
Heaviest insulation you can find.
It's the heaviest insulation that doesn't really have any R value. So there's a solid 8-inch wall of concrete, and we're looking down on it. And here is see if you can tell what I'm drawing. A concrete block, a CMU, a concrete masonry unit, a cinder block. Where I come from, people put 4 of these in the front yard and put a car on it. Never mind. Okay. All right. So, ba-dum-bum. All right. So this is 8 inches. This is 8 inches, and the R value of a solid concrete wall is less than 2. I'll call it in the neighborhood of, I'll call it 1.7, something like that. Do you think this block wall would be slightly better or slightly worse? Same's not an option. I'm sorry, I've taken that option away. It's actually slightly better. It's because it has this air that's a little bit better in it. So in other words, concrete is, pretty poor R value per inch. Not very good. I mean, an 8-inch wall is not even R2. So this is only slightly better because of these air spaces. Now, what's funny is a lot of times people will say, well, I'm going to come in and I'm going to fill that with insulation. And I'm going to make this part be R13. But do you think the wall assembly performs as R13? No, because you've got all these thermal bridges right here. So it really probably raises it to, I'll give it a 4, maybe a 5. So it's not to say there's no impact, but it's not as good as you'd like it to be. Sometimes it's still worth it to do it, but it's generally not what we want it to be. So the reality of it is, concrete, while mass is good, the best thing you can do for a mass wall is to put foam insulation on the outside of it. Yeah?
What about these new foam blocks in the built wall?
Oh, ICFs. Yes, they're terrific. That's what our building's made out of at South Face.
R value.
Off the charts good. It's the system we used is, where's that white foam board I have? It's 2.5 inches of this, and then say 10 inches of concrete. So there's a little R value, about a 2 or so in the concrete. Another 2.5 inches in that on the inside. So it's about an R10, another R2, another R10 plus a little cladding. The wall assembly is pushing 22, 25. It's a really good assembly. So everybody know what we're talking about? Those styrofoam Legos that I have pictures of them, but I don't have them on this. See, it's killing me. It's killing me, Tracy. I can't point. I'll show you pictures of it.
This old house used
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Oh, they're phenomenal. That's the house, or that's the building you want to be in when the big one hits. I mean, that's the one that is really sturdy. And I would recommend looking into the ones that we used. We used a foam that has a borate in the foam, so that's resistant to the termites. Your risk of termites is not as great as ours, but you still have termite issues, right? Yeah, I mean, it's the Southeast, so it's funny, they draw these maps, and it'd be like, well, they go up to South Carolina, North Carolina border, but you go into they're not as bad in North Carolina, it's kind of funny. So, yeah, tell that to the termite. But the reality of it is, or the kind we used has a borate in it. They are more expensive than a conventional wall, but even if you just did the basement wall, but ours, we did our 3-story building and the foundation out of it, so it's great. I love them. They're more expensive, but they make a nice thick wall, the massive wall. I mean, that building is very, very efficient.
Setup time's quicker too.
Could be. Get an experienced installer. Not always a given. So, any other questions or thoughts on basements? Slabs, remember that slabs do conduct heat because they're made out of this stuff. And it turns out heat loss to the ground is pretty minimal compared to the edge of the slab. It's the exposed edge that really matters on the slab. So I've seen a lot of architects put this detail on a plan, and they just don't know why. They just do it because somebody else did it. And it might make sense in a cold climate, but they'll do something like that as their slab detail, and they'll show insulation under here, and it's worthless. I mean, if you do this and you don't do the exposed edge, I mean, it's silly. This is 3% of the loss, and this is 97% or something like that. So what you want is an R value that comes down. You can also turn it in like that. It doesn't have to all go straight down 2 feet, but you want it to add up to be 2 feet. And to meet prescriptive code, it's a little thick. It's about an R10, which is, to me, a big jump. Honestly, I think it's a big jump to go from 0 to 10. I felt like that's a little harsh, but in Georgia, you don't have to do that because Georgia, we freak out about termites, so we just don't do it. There are ways, again, I've done it with this type of borate treated foam that is a termite resistance. You could also do some insulation and maybe trade off a little. So maybe instead of R10, I might do R4 or 5, things like that. Any thoughts? Fire ants around here? I gotta believe they're sure where I live.
They eat that blue foam board.
Could be, yeah.
No, I know they do. We put it.
I like the borate. I like the borate in the white EPS foam. That would be my recommendation. If you put radiant tubing in a slab, you have to bump the R value from 10 to 15. You know what I'm talking about? If you actually heat the slab, so to speak. Okay. And then finally, crawl spaces. And I think on this one I might show you a little video so we can stand up. But first of all, the code allows you to do what I call the 1970s standard vented crawl space, vintage vented crawl space, where you put vents, put R19 under the floor, put plastic on the ground, and everybody seems like they're happy. Then you go back a year or two later, and it smells really moldy in there. Why? Because humid air gets in when we vent, and it gets cold, and it condenses, and it grows mold, or causes rot. Here's another option where you can do a closed crawl space and still do underfloor, but now it's not vented. You have to follow the rules for an unvented crawl space. And if you're gonna do an unvented crawl space, this is the one to do. Has anybody ever done this or seen this done? What's your take on? Do y'all build these now? How do you do it?
We subcontract and spray foam on the perimeter.
You actually foam. Okay, spray the foam. What about you?
My mother and dad had it done. They done their crawl space. They did the walls.
With spray foam? I had it retrofitted on mine. It took me a long time to get to this point because I had to sort of fix a lot of things. Make sure that on a retrofit project, you really got to make sure you don't have a drainage problem. And I'll share with you all my stories, but I ended up using this product. I had this product attached to the brick instead of doing spray foam. I don't know why, if it was easier or harder, but
We developed a system using the fiberglass, vinyl clad fiberglass, like you showed
yeah,
in the video.
uh-huh.
But what we ran into was drainage issues.
Yeah.
Builders not doing their job as far as taking care of water. And so we ended up tearing it all out. And this was on numerous occasions.
Yeah,
And we just gave up.
I would be wary of the vinyl backed bat on a crawl space. I would feel better in a basement, but it's not to say that if there's a moisture problem, it could overwhelm it. So you're right about that. So a couple things on this. This used to be super controversial, but today a lot more people are comfortable with it. It is not for all crawl spaces. Let me just say, not every crawl space is a good candidate for this. But here are some important details. You must cover the ground completely with really good plastic, and you must overlap the seams and tape them and run them up the walls and seal them. And I like this kind of plastic. I mean, try and tear this. And actually, retrofit companies come in. Do they do this on your folks' house? And it looks all pretty. I mean, it's like you could sort of put your mother-in-law in there. And I don't know. Sorry, pass that around. Sorry.
Some do, some do.
Sorry. Or you could go there when your mother-in-law visits. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. Man cave. And seal it. It may be in the more. It may be that I'm reading in the more future version. It may be in 06. Their language admittedly was fuzzy. So I guess I'm probably quoting you the 09 version because they cleaned that up. The intent was that it would be sealed. Honestly, from a diffusion standpoint, if it overlaps and doesn't have any gaps, it's probably going to do its job. But
And the difference is, if it's a vented crawl space, code does not say it has to be taped, sealed. If
in
it's a non-vented,
in the
then it
future
does.
version, they said everything has to have a Class 1 vapor retarder. In this one, they still want the plastic. I don't remember the specifics. We can look it up, but if I believe you if you're saying it's vague. I think what happened is they wrote it and they didn't realize that they really left it vague, and then it got more strict in this one.
Are you going to require it to be lapped and sealed and turned up the wall? And I said, well, it's a very good idea. I wouldn't put plastic down
Yeah.
without plastic sealing. That's the way I've left it.
I'm
As a building inspector, I guess
I think it's a crawl space that's closed is a system, and I think that is definitely the correct practice, in my opinion, for that system.
He's talking about a vented crawl.
Even a vented crawl space, it says 100% coverage, but it is vague. Vented crawl space, probably not as big a deal, honestly, but a closed crawl space, definitely.
May I ask you a
Uh-huh.
question? Because we have done a whole lot of this, and that appears to be mastic, that little sealant there.
Yeah.
We have had disaster with mastic. It does not adhere well on the plastic.
It does when it dries, but it takes a while to dry. Even you're having. So okay, here's a couple things.
We've used liquid nails.
Liquid
That's
nail,
been the best.
acoustic sealant. Someone suggested that. They said they had really good luck with that. Acoustical sealant. It's another kind of caulk. I don't know if it's better than liquid nail. I fix a lot of things with liquid nails, so I'm with you on that one. I've also used a very good wide vinyl sticky tape that is really pretty sticky, and if the surfaces are pretty clean, I think it works well. And if it starts to give any, I would either come back with mastic on it. I mean, once you control that environment, the chances of the tape failing become a lot less. In other words, you keep it dry in there, I think your chances are better. I know I've done this before where we used kind of like a furring strip, a horizontal furring strip, and shot into it, and that was sort of our seal. You could run a bead of caulk on that. I'm a belt and suspenders guy. I like the mechanical fastening on that. So it sounds like you're on that.
Again, this is an area that we are all in new territory.
Yeah.
We don't have a proven system. We have a lot of people trying different things.
I'll give you a great place to go if you haven't already found this website. But and we're going to watch a little video here in a second. So I also emphasize that closing up a crawl space is not going to fix a bad drainage problem. It's just like having a basement with a bad drainage problem. And you cannot use a standard 80% furnace in that space. So you got to go to a heat pump or a high efficiency furnace. That's crucial. You can't use the crawl space for combustion air. And you got to make sure, really the code officials are more up to speed. It's the pest control industry. They have caused all kinds of problems for us. So in Georgia, we compromise. We leave a 3-inch view gap at the top for pest control. On my own house, I ran it, and I had a strip, and then I put a strip of foam board in that, and I taped the seam so you can hinge it down and look, but push it back up, because I want the coverage of the insulation. But that's a compromise.
The termite people want to look for the
Yeah, absolutely, and I get that, but I don't know, the pest control industry in Georgia, they're terrible. This is the website that has a lot of good information, crawlspaces.org. We're going to watch a little video. That's a great place that sells things like that really good plastic. And do we have audio over here? We're a small group, so maybe you can hear it. Let's kind of get up. We need to walk around a little bit anyway. Oh, speakers, yes. How do I make them work? Is that the right one? Oh, that one. Sorry, that one. Good call. You're on it. Thank you. It worked perfectly. See, I think it's on. All right, let's get it.
We have 2 contractors that's come in, Lake and Charles.
Okay.
Just
Acknowledge them. All right, thank you. All right, I'm gonna blow this up here. Awesome music.
Much of the crawl space moisture debate centers on the question of whether crawl spaces should be vented or closed. To provide real-world answers, the Crawl Space Research Project is conducting a multi-year field test that compares wall-vented crawl spaces to closed crawl spaces without foundation vents. Started in August 2001, the field test has operated long enough that the moisture results have become stable and predictable. This graph summarizes measured relative humidity at the test site for the summer of 2002. The first green line to draw in is the outdoor humidity. The red line that appears next is the control group of wall-vented crawl spaces. Notice how closely crawl space humidity followed the humid outdoor conditions. With humidity levels above 70% for 79% of the time, the wall-vented group stayed damp and maintained mold-growing conditions most of the summer.
This is the mold line above that.
The last blue line to appear is the experiment group of closed crawl spaces. In sharp contrast, the closed crawl space group did not follow outdoor humidity and instead stayed dry with relative humidity levels below 60% all summer. The field test site is a 12-home subdevelopment in eastern North Carolina. The 4 homes in red on the site plan are the control group of wall-vented crawl spaces. The control group has open foundation vents and a carefully installed 6mm poly vapor retarder that covers the entire earth floor. The remaining 8 homes in blue are the experiment group of closed crawl spaces. This group was converted to closed spaces by blocking off foundation vents and air sealing walls. In addition, the earth floor and inside wall surfaces were fully covered by a sealed liner of 6mm poly. Moisture conditions at the site are measured with data loggers that record temperature and relative humidity levels every 15 minutes. In wall-vented crawl spaces, foundation vents are installed to passively vent excess moisture to outdoors. This passive drying effect comes into question during the summer when warm and humid outdoor air enters the crawl space through the vents and adds moisture instead of removing moisture.
Oops, I almost got it. I was trying to pause here for a second.
Sure.
Okay, so what he just said, this is kind of the crux of the issue right here, is that we live in a humid climate, right? The outside air gets really muggy. If you take muggy air, warm muggy air, and you introduce it into a cooler space, why is the crawl space cooler than the outside in the summer? What's it coupled to that makes it cooler? The ground. So when you take warm, humid air and you introduce it into, a ground-coupled cooler space, what happens when you cool air? Well, the relative humidity goes up, and it's quite possible that you could get way below dew point and literally have condensation. Anybody ever seen condensation on floor joists in a crawl space? Anybody ever seen condensation on exposed ducts that maybe weren't well insulated, or boots and they're dripping condensate, right? Yeah, and all in the insulation. And so that's a real common thing. So and he went through that in the other graph. He was saying 70% is sort of the switch, if you will, for mold. It's not to say mold can't grow at lower relative humidities, but for home, if you can keep the home or surfaces below, the areas below 70%, you generally are not going to have a mold outbreak. And that's, what they found. The vented crawl spaces were getting really high relative humidities. It only takes 24 to 48 hours for mold to kind of take off. And, most of the summer, I think he said almost 80% of the summer, they were above the switch. Does that make sense? I think that's really the gist of this whole thing. And so it's funny, the guy narrating this is a friend of mine, and he and I were talking about doing this in the mid-90s, and you would have thought that we had our heads removed and just were going, people just thought we were nuts. Everybody knows venting a crawl space is a good idea. Well, why? Well, because we've always done it that way. Well, why? Well, because FHA told us to do it that way. Well, why? And yeah, exactly. Once again, kind of bad building science. And even in northern climates, a lot of times this is questionable. What I think is funny is they make these vents that are thermostatic. You know what I'm talking about? And I'm going to get this straight. They open in the summer when it's real humid, and then they close in the winter when it's real dry. Well, my crawl space, like many crawl spaces, they were always open a little bit, right? They were always at least cracked open. And what happens is in the summer, this kind of condition happens. The boards, the floorboards, the floor joists, everything just gets really, really chock full of moisture. And then in the winter, you get cold, dry air going in, and it over dries the boards. The boards dry out. What happens to my floorboards? They separate out, right? I lost a child down one of those cracks, but it, fished them out. But I mean, big gaps. And then in the summer, once again, they swell back up. And what happens is dirt or particles of dirt fall in, and they buckle the floor. Anybody know what I'm talking about here? So, fortunately, our floors are so lousy that you can't even tell. But it's a chic look we're looking. So what we did is we closed it off, and we put the plastic like you saw. And as a result, the crawl space has stayed a much more constant condition. Now, the code allows you to do a closed-off crawl space, provided you condition the crawl space. You can do it a couple ways. You can suck air continually out. You can exhaust air all the time out of a crawl space. A radon vent system would qualify as that. A fan in here blowing all the time. I think the logic in that is that you're going to probably pull some conditioned air down. Your house is always higher than this is lower pressure. I think it's going to indirectly condition the crawl. I haven't honestly tried that a whole lot. I think there are other ways. The most common way people seem to do it is to put a little bit of supply air. Is that what y'all do? They'll run ductwork in this space, a little bit of supply, and actually condition it. So you insulate the walls, you condition it. It's not a livable space, but it's a condition inside the envelope space. The way I chose to do it, and I actually think this is the best, is with a dedicated dehumidifier. I'm conditioning it with a dehumidifier. Why? Well, okay, think about it. If I insulate the walls here, and even on a cold day, the house is at 70, the ground is at 55, the temperature is not what I'm worried about. The temperature of the crawl space is going to be between this and this, right? I'm not worried about the temperature. What do I care about in my crawl space? Moisture. So for that reason, I think a dedicated dehumidifier is a good route to go. Now, I admit, I am playing around with it. I bought an Energy Star, pretty inexpensive 40-pint dehumidifier. I did tried to get all the details done right. And I, just for jollies, ran it for 1 month continuously and decided that was too much energy. It was too expensive for me to run it. So I put it on a time clock, and I'm running it for about a fourth of that. And I'm tracking it. I got a data logger in there. How many hours does the relative humidity get above? I've set it at 65%. And after 150 days, it's gotten 7 hours above 65%. So I feel like I got about the right, that's my playing around with it. I think it's a good idea to put a safety in there, literally an alarm that will go off, and mine has it will start beeping. If the relative humidity gets above 70%, it will start beeping. So not a bad idea probably, just to be aware of it. It is a system. It can be screwed up or it can be done well, just like anything. We good? Can you turn on the light in the middle part? Because I feel like I can't see you and you might be getting out weapons or anything. All right. Thoughts on this? What do you think? So who's done this before? When it works, did it work well?
We use a ceiling fan.
Just to circulate air. But you're not, and then
your dead air is the problem.
Dead air is an issue.
If you just move that.
Yeah. That's interesting. You hang a ceiling fan? I've thought about putting a box fan.
A 1995 ceiling fan.
Yeah.
Down, it'll move a lot of air around.
I've thought about putting a box fan near my dehumidifier just to help circulate it around. That's an interesting idea.
Dehumidifier, but we're fixing to.
Yeah.
We're going to plumb it in where you don't got to empty it.
Yeah, that's what thank you. Yeah, you definitely want to. I drained it to my condensate pump. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good detail. Question, comment.
We have a moisture problem in our house, and they did the insulation around the crawl space walls.
Uh-huh.
I suggested that we put a 4-inch duct down with a damper in it, so that the normal unit, matter of fact, the unit, air handler unit was in the crawl space.
Right, so you can just condition it a little bit. Yeah.
And then have, so that you don't have that stale air going back up into a turn.
Yeah.
Outside the building.
For makeup air.
Diagonal of the building. Again, put a gravity damper on it, so that when you get a positive pressure, that's moving that air out.
Yeah,
What's your thoughts on that?
that's one reason why I chose not to use air off the air handler. Now, to be perfectly fair about this, I probably have some duct leakage. I've sealed the ducts to some extent, but there is probably a little bit of duct leakage that's sort of indirectly conditioning it. But I also, our house, we're pretty hardcore. We don't run the air conditioner much. So my crawl space needs dehumidification when we're up in the house living high and dry, using a whole house fan, whatever. I mean, we're doing different things. So, but that was one reason. I don't want the crawl space air in the living space, because even though it's a lot better than it ever was in its life, it's still not my favorite place. You know, I get banished there every once in a while, but you know, it's still not my favorite place. So I chose to still try to air seal this off and individually condition it. That was my take on it, but I'm not to say that couldn't work.
Yeah, I'm not sending it back up into the house.
No, I got you. You got a pressure relief is what you're saying. I think that could work. You know, some of this is a little bit rocket brain surgery science, and you know, we're still figuring it out. But
We've looked at a lot, had a lot
Yeah.
of success with doing this higher elevations on the Cumberland Plateau. It tends to be a little more problem, I think. Maybe because you have cooler nights.
could be.
The switch, but what you said earlier, a lot of people think it's counterintuitive to close the vents until you explain hot, humid
Yeah.
here, cool, dry place here, wants to move there, you know, all the condensation dew point.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of success talking to people that moved from a house that was a basement house. I said, just think about this as a basement for short people.
That's a great way to describe it. Yeah. No, that's
Same thing as a basement.
pretty much
You
it.
wouldn't leave a window open in the basement. You wouldn't leave a vent open in the crawl space.
That's-
Put plastic down before you pour through concrete.
Yep.
And you make sure that your slope away from the house is positive, so water's not running back. Downspouts are extended away from the house. Dryer
Yep.
vent, really important. Make sure it's
Everything's got to go. You know, absolutely. And any of those could be messed up and could hurt this system and keep it from working. That doesn't mean the concept doesn't work, but it means there are details to this, and there is nothing foolproof on this. I will definitely say that. But when it's done well, it seems to work well. One other big caution, and this is partly why I've gone to the dehumidifier approach, is if your system is oversized and you're relying on it to supply conditioned air, you may not be getting the runtime from your air handler because the thermostat is up here. This needs dehumidification, but this part's okay. That's why I finally looked at it and I was like, you know what? I don't care. The temperature is always going to be fine. It's the moisture I'm concerned about. So that's kind of why I went that route. And I picked a little, I think it was a Soleus Energy Star 40 pint per day small dehumidifier. Bought it on Amazon.
They're cheaper than going back one time.
Well, that's true. I mean, there's a cost associated with running it, so that's why I put it on a little cheap time clock. But I feel like it's a good compromise. One nice thing about this approach as opposed to underfloor, and slabs get this benefit as well. They're ground coupled, so if you actually get some sort of free air conditioning benefit in the summer, your house, and that's one reason why, I mean, we literally, even though did you know July was the hottest month ever recorded in the history of recording temperature? This July was just, remember July? It was killer hot. August was a whole lot, I thought I was going to die, but August got a lot better, and September was pretty good. So July was a really hot month. Even still, we didn't run our air conditioner that much, and I think some of the benefit was the coupling to the floor. My mother-in-law came to visit. We ran our air conditioner all the time, and that was like, my kids and my wife and I are like this, and we're just like, will she ever leave? It's killing my energy bills. Yeah.
Well, part of the short basics we talked about.
Yeah.
Not efficient.
Yeah.
So dehumidify.
Yeah.
Set it about 55 to 60.
Yeah.
And I think it helps with the house, lowering the humidity level in the house.
I think so too.
Level, then you can raise your thermostat.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the benefits that we found too, is that we didn't seem to need as much additional air conditioning, even in the really, really killer months. So.
Moving air in the crawl space, you're going to have the same problem you have moving air up in the attic. And you talk about the humidity.
No, he's saying move it with a fan, which might be a good idea.
But then you've got the positive and negative air space, whether it be sucking out of the house or not. I mean, it's the same up in the attic as it is downstairs.
Well, I think he's talking about, forgive me, I think he's talking about circulating air in the crawl space. Is that what you're trying? Because if you circulate air, you're a lot less likely to grow stuff. If it's closed, correct. Right. I'm sorry.
Don't you also have a problem, because I was just thinking about this, you're talking about the humidity, because of the cold. Well, if you're running your ducts up in your attic, you're still going to have that same thing, and you could have the sweating ducts up in the attic because they're hot, and the ducts are cold.
You're less likely to see, you could have sweating of the ducts in the attic, but we do insulate the ducts. If the ducts were uninsulated, and you would most likely see it in the early morning before the sun had heated up the roof. In other words, there's still a fair amount of moisture in the attic, but if you had an exposed duct surface, which obviously you wouldn't want that, but if you had an uninsulated surface and the air conditioner was running, you definitely could see sweating on that duct at that time of day. But once the sun comes up and heats up the roof, the attic temperature gets so high that even though there's a lot of moisture, chances are the dew point has gone way up. You may not see condensation later in the afternoon because it's so much hotter in that space. So I think I worry less about condensation on ducts in an attic. If they're insulated, they really shouldn't have any condensation issues. If they're done, anything could go wrong, but if they're done right, that shouldn't be a problem. Anybody else seen sweating ducts?
I've got ducts in my garage and they sweat.
Yeah, and that's, by the way, the code doesn't want you to run ducts in a garage either. That's another,
Well, that's a house now.
Okay. In other words, an unconditioned garage is kind of where you're parking a giant polluting device, your car, and if you've got return leaks there. Oh, I know. A lot of houses have that, but today I don't think you're allowed. I don't think you're allowed to put ducts in a garage, which is a good thing. That is a very good thing. Let's try to wrap. Great job, great discussion. Let's try to punch out a couple other things and get to the finish line. And we'll stay and talk as long as we want to. Can you work your magic on that light switch, John? And thank you. So there we saw that. Here's what the code says. I don't necessarily agree with this. The code says, this is where they put something in that makes sense in Minnesota, but they want you to insulate down and in 2 feet. I think that's overkill, personally. I think that's, and in Georgia, we took that out. We just felt like that was overkill. So if you're a code official, I'd say roll your eyes a little on that part. If I'm in Minnesota, yeah, there's going to be, but that's below grade. I think we can live with it.
We haven't looked at that at this point. We can't do everything.
Yeah. I think this is pretty good, and that's the borate treated. They used a termite flashing detail, which I really liked, but they did not put a V-strip. But the flashing detail should, if the termites try to tunnel around, you'll see that.
You can't do the termite strip and be code.
You can in Georgia because we amended our code to require that. And North Carolina did too, by the way, just so you know. So you got 2 states adjacent to you that are pretty much saying that's the way to do it, if that helps your argument. But
Not with the official.
I understand. Well, I mean, I think, you know, if you can show best practice and really give credit to North Carolina, they did a lot of this research. That was from Advanced Energy, and they're good folks. So go to their website. But I think this is a little overkill. This is my commentary about why do I not like underfloor insulation? Because number one, there's so much stuff in the way, framing and plumbing and wiring and ductwork. And number two, just, you know, what happened? I mean, how many crawl spaces look like this? 99%. Yeah, I mean, a lot of them do. It just does not work. So I think, and you know, we look at this picture and we're like, wow, look at these beautiful walls right here. You know, we could have made this a short basement. Look, they have a heat pump. It's ready to go. And somebody made them put vents in, or, you know, something stupid. So we're still fighting this one. It's getting easier. It's definitely getting easier. Don't worry about these two. We're going to skip this. I want to, windows, basically, U factor is sort of like the insulating value. It's 1 over the R value, so it's kind of the insulation effect of the window. Solar heat gain is the summertime impact. This is sort of the winter performance. This is the summer performance. You want them both to be low. And what you find is because of either the solar gain in climate zone 3 or the U factor in zone 4, you got to have low E. So low E window is the answer. Double pane low E window, that's your choice.
Do they not, they've got, what I remember, they have a double low E now. In other words, low E has got argon, it's also got a film.
Yeah, they have these
Double low E has a layer of film on the inside.
on a triple pane window or a double pane window with 2 coatings. Could be. They're always trying to do crazy stuff like that. It's your typical window double pane low E is going to be fine. We always say the inert gas, the argon or the kryptonite or whatever they put in that stuff. You know, it's an inert gas. You can't see it. It definitely works in the lab, but you have no way of knowing that it's really there in the field. There's no. I got a device. I don't think I brought it, but they make a device called a low E detector. It looks like a stud sensor. I should have brought it. And you just put it on the glass on a double pane window, and it'll tell you if there's a low E coating and which surface it's on. And you can buy one of those. And as a code official, you might want to invest in one of those. Or it's a great way if someone says, yeah, it's low E, but I don't have a sticker, you know. You know, but
And Mike, for our folks that are building a new house, solar heat gain, and you mentioned it, the lower that number, the better. And like that was at 0.4, that means that 40% of that solar energy comes into the house, 60% is reflected. So the lower that number, the less of that solar energy comes into the house. So
yeah.
I'd like to see around 0.3.
Yeah, and that's typically what you'll get with a double pane low E. You replaced your windows? Was it with an Anderson? That's pretty good. Yeah, that's great. Anderson and Marvin have a line of windows that don't use vinyl or wood. They're extruded fiberglass, and I really like those. So if y'all are listening, extruded fiberglass, it's got all the benefits of wood and vinyl without all the negatives of wood and vinyl. Vinyl's got some toxicity in its manufacturer, but it doesn't rot. Wood is natural material, but you got to maintain it, and it could rot. Vinyl you can't paint, but the fiberglass it solves all those problems. It's got very good thermal performance. It's very stable at all temperatures. You can paint it if you want to. You don't have to. Marvin has a brand that is called Integrity. That's kind of the builder brand. It's not like a super expensive Marvin window. Anderson has a similar, probably some other companies. But the technology that we're talking about is a extruded fiberglass frame, and it's very, very durable. I would say that would be a good investment in my opinion. I would put those windows in. You get a freebie on one window. You get a freebie on one door, and just not, you know, you still meet the prescriptive code even if, you know, some decorative glazing goes in. And we mentioned this, but basically you gotta have a label. If you don't have a label on your window, you get these default values from the code, and they fail. So in other words, even though the manufacturer says it's double pane low E, if it doesn't have a sticker, it counts as a bad U factor and a bad solar gain. So that's the most important thing, is the sticker needs to be on there. That's something you can expect for at rough end or at final. It's, you know, probably easier at rough end, but Okay, to do trade-offs, you can do res check or the simulation res check. I think we're running a little short on time. I may not be able to show it, but it's very easy to use. Maybe I'll show you really quick. Here's a little example I did where this was the house, and that was a conditioned laundry room, and we made the building envelope look like that, essentially. So you would have to enter in the square footage of the house, the perimeter of the slab, the perimeter times the 9 foot would give you the gross wall area, the flat ceiling. You enter all this in the windows and doors. You enter all this into res check, and it does a trade. It allows you to trade off. Oh heck, let's try it. Let's see how fast we can do res check. Okay, speed res check. You have to look over here though. Okay, can you work your magic with the lights? Let's get out of here. If I get lucky, maybe I have it already. One of these already pulled up. So the best part about res check is it's free. I like free. And you get it from energycodes.gov. So it pulls up, and I guess I was playing with it here. Let me see if I got a file. I'll just do this. I'll just make one. So here we are. I'm going to change it to Cleveland, Tennessee, and I'm going to do new construction, and I'm just going to put in the numbers for that house that was on the board over there. And you can put stuff in here about 1588 square foot. You can put stuff in here about, you know, the builder and the owner and, you know, Joe. So we got Joe over here. And all that will show up on the reports, which is nice. So you come over here and you need to select which version of the code that we're talking about. So you're going to find different trade-offs that are available in different versions of the code. The 2006 is the one you want for the state of Tennessee. So we'll pick that. And when I come over here to envelope, I click on that tab. And what's nice about this, the people that made this software did a good job because they really tried to make it so you didn't have to type much. The only thing you have to type in are numbers. And you click and pull down on everything else. So this house has a ceiling. So you click on ceiling, and it says there's a flat ceiling, a vaulted ceiling, a raised truss, other types of SIP, and so on. I'm going to pick flat ceiling. You put in the area, 1588, and you put in the R value. I'm going to go ahead and put in, what's the R value for ceilings? 38. So I'll put in 38. And it says I don't have a wall yet, so it's not ready to calculate yet. So if you have a skylight, you can subtract that out of the ceiling. If you have another kind of ceiling, you just make another entry. I'll put in a wall. Look at the wall options. Wood frame, 1624. Steel frame, solid concrete. Masonry block with empty cells. Masonry block with insulation inside. Log walls. SIPs. ICFs. So you can do just about any kind of wall assembly. It's sort of pre-made into this. So we're just going to pick the standard wood frame 16-inch on center. I'm going to put in the gross wall area, which is the perimeter times 9 in this case. And the cavity insulation, what was the prescriptive for a cavity? 13. So let's put that in. And it says I'm missing a floor assembly. So obviously I need to put windows and doors in, but let's do those next. The windows will subtract out of that 1692. So it's sort of written as like a little kind of subset of that. So if I type in 200, it'll subtract that out of there. So the windows, you can describe it. And it really doesn't matter here. But I'll say it's a vinyl double pane low E. And I'll say 142 square feet of windows. The U factor, John, what's a typical window? 32. And what solar heat gain in this case doesn't really matter, but we'll put it in. I'll put it in as a 0.35. It's probably lower. Could be 3. Yeah, whatever. It's not going to matter. And then we also have doors. So I've got a couple solid doors, and those are 20 square feet each. So I'm going to put 2 of them as 40. And at U factor, this is cool. You can right-click and actually take a default. So it's pretty easy to use. I'm just going to say it's steel foam core door. I'm sorry, insulated metal. That's what I was trying to pick. Insulated metal. And then the last thing we had was a patio sliding glass door. So we'll pick that. And that was also about 40 square feet. And I'll just put in a 0.4 for that one and a 0.3 for that one. Okay? So now I've put in all the ceilings and all the walls. I still have one more thing to do. What's that? Some kind of foundation. Okay? So the choices are, do you want to do a slab? Do you want to do a floor over a crawl space? Do you want to do a basement wall, or do you want to do a crawl space wall? So you have your choices. Floor could be a floor over unconditioned space. That would be a crawl space. Floor over outside air, what would that be? A cantilever, maybe, or a house on stilts or something. Probably don't see that too much. Or a slab. I could do a slab, an unheated slab. So I'm going to do a crawl space one on this one. And I'll put in the floor area, 1588. And I'll put in the R19. And it has calculated that we are, I have to hit the check button here. Hang on a second. It's calculated that because our windows are better, I am about 3.5% better than code right now, because a house built exactly to code would have a UA, the U times this area, contribution of 341, but my UA is less. It's 329. And I always kind of use the analogy, it's kind of like, I don't play golf, but it's kind of like playing golf, where you kind of bogey one hole, but you birdie two others. As long as at the end of the day you're at par or less, you win the game. Does that make sense? And that's an example of some trade-offs. So let's try a couple things. Let's say that I wanted to insulate the roof line instead of R38. I want to insulate the roof line. Let's say that bumps that number up to 1,800, a little more surface area, and I'm going to insulate it to R20. And let's check compliance. And now I'm worse than code. Okay? So I'm at 347, and I'm at 367, but my limit is 347. So you have a couple options here. We could try to make better insulation in the windows, maybe add some foam board, do some other things over here. Or, well, okay, let's do that first. So we'll try let's say we put an R3 everywhere. And that's got us there. Okay, so that was one way to do a trade-off. We passed with that one. Let's take that one out. And yeah, I just did a 1/2-inch foam board like the Habitat folks are doing. So that one got me there. What's another option? Anybody else? Any other thoughts? Yeah, we could try a crawl space. I have no idea if it'll work better or worse. We'll put crawl wall. I'll put masonry block with empty insulation, and it says, how high is the wall? We'll just say it's 3 foot, and the depth below grade on average, maybe 1. You tell me. And then the insulation will be 3 and 0, or 1. Wait, is that 1? I think I did that right. Does that make sense? And I need to take this floor out, so I need to dump this floor because it's no longer appropriate. It says really, and then I'll put the perimeter was 188, and I need to tell it. I'm going to say that wall has a continuous 10, and I'm still not passing. I'm not getting it there. It got a little worse. And that's just because you got to understand, this is not a real simulation tool. This is doing a very crude trade-off just in the envelope. But so in reality, this probably would be better. And a true simulation would show that this was better because the ducts would be inside. But this does not account for that. continuous insulation.
Mike, did you try putting the foam board continuous on the outside?
I thought I did. Continuous insulation R10. Anyway, here's the other thing that you have, though, is only in the 2006 code. This goes away in later versions. You can actually take credit for more efficient air conditioners and heat pumps and furnaces. So it assumes you have the standard efficiency. So I'm just going to try it with I know some of you have heat pumps. I'm going to try a standard furnace. The minimum is 78. If I've got, let's say, a 95% furnace, oh, I hate this. You have to go, yeah, you have to tell it, okay, nothing comes easy for me. You have to specify the orientation of all of these and blah, blah, blah. So it gets a little more work to do this trade-off, but it does give you credit for, I have to put, where do I tell it the orientation? Do you see where it's telling me? I haven't done this in so long because this has been gone. This option has been gone in the code. But, oh well, sorry about that.
While you're on the screen, Mike,
Huh?
can you press that one more time? Continuous insulation of the walls, it says 0 in there.
Right here,
Yeah. Would that be your foam board?
that actually gets us to pass. You notice we haven't, it's looking for orientation, but it wants me to tell it which way front is. Maybe it's on the first page. And somewhere you have to tell it that the front faces north or whatever. But yeah, John, you can tell it actually gets you to pass because you're, no, wait a minute. No, not quite. That's 288 and 294.
So. You have to put anything in with them ever.
I can't see it.
Well, yeah, I see it now. Okay, sure.
How about we get someone who can see to come up here? But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that you can, there it passed with an R5. So the point is you can do trade-offs. This is a crude trade-off tool. It will allow you to take some credit for high equipment efficiency. We generally, and you're going to find this goes away in the 09 code, we generally encourage you to essentially make the building pass on its own. In other words, the new code says you got to get the building to pass without the furnace to give you credit. So here we managed to get the building to pass on its own, so it's 1% better. So what's great about ResCheck, there's a similar program for commercial. What's great about this, though, is it shows how someone did a valid trade-off. And it's not your code official. It's not your job to do this. It's your job to ask for this. It's their job to show you they did a valid trade-off. And they can create a printout. So, okay, we got to stop. This is killing me. Hang in there, guys. So the printout is actually a nice piece of documentation that comes with it. So it says you passed. It says what the details are, what your wall and window ratio is. Here's all the trade-offs you did. And here's a really nice checklist that is specific to this house. So this is a nice compliance tool for the code support. We actually have some code jurisdictions in Georgia that require you to do ResCheck even if you're going to meet prescriptive code because they like this paperwork. And that's, you know, their prerogative, I guess. All right, I'm almost done. I just want to kind of wrap up and touch one or two more things, and then we'll be on our merry way. So, air sealing, we've touched on this. Can you just, sorry, again. We've covered this a great deal, and I even brought samples of it, what John was talking about, but can you imagine, can you see the difference between these light fixtures, performance-wise?
Oh, yeah.
Which one do you want to have penetrating your insulation? This one. It's airtight and IC rated. This costs $1 more than this light fixture. Wow. So don't do this. If you have this, some people do this. I hate these. I would prefer you rip the light fixture out and put the right one in. I don't always win on that, but that's my preference. Air sealing, huh? It could be a fire hazard, so that's why I put the right one in. This has got a thermal switch. Right, right. But you still end up with a big patch that's not insulated. That's why I don't like those boxes. Yeah, in my opinion, yeah, they're sort of good, better, best, and best would be to take it out and put in the right light fixture. So I'm not saying you can't do it, but in the 09 code, you're not allowed to do this anymore. That goes away. So there's a nice whole bunch of graphics. This is all on the southface.org website. I'm not going to spend too much time, but basically get rid of big holes. That's a chase. Seal up that chase. Seal up these kind of plumbing penetration holes. That's a massive hole. And I don't know if I have any pictures on this. Yeah, that was I thought this was funny. I was doing an inspection on a house, and they had sealed this. So you got to give them credit for that, right? That's my job. That's my job. My job, I seal those pipes, right? So you sealed this, but you forgot this, right?
One hole.
Yeah. So I fixed, in the end we fixed it, but we used really expensive materials, right? Some foam board, some caulk, a couple screws to hold the foam board into the caulk till it dries, and then you use foam in a can to make it go away. So, that was my own house. I was like, wow, that's my interior wall right there. And I fixed it. And the funny story here is I'm laying on my back in my crawl space, and you know those camel crickets? You know what I'm talking about? They're big, they're mean, they're scary. So I hate being in my crawl space anyway, and I'm working on my back. And one of these camel crickets starts gnawing on my leg, and I am freaking out. I was like, what? Turned out it was my dog, though, so it was okay. So he surprised me. And then, John, I don't know if I told you about this. This was we stayed in a Norman Bates motel, I think is what it was called, and it was up in here, past Cleveland, somewhere in rural Appalachia here. And we were staying in this hotel, and 3 doors down was this traveling snake reptile show. And somehow a 5-foot python ended up in the room of my coworker. And how did it get there? And what's funny is, and honestly, I don't know what was scary. The snake didn't scare me as much as this guy's back right here. But anyway.
I was going to say, he looks pretty scary.
But he comes in, oh, a python, I'll take that for you if you want. And he's like acting like it's not his. I'm like, oh yeah, this is indigenous to Appalachia. But anyway, it had crawled there through plumbing penetrations that were not sealed. And it, for whatever reason, came out 3 doors down. So. Okay, think of it. Air sealing stops critters of all sizes. So it keeps bugs out, too. That's another benefit. Seal light boxes, boots to the drywall, boots to the subfloor, chases for mechanical penetrations, tubs. Let me go to this one. Windows in the rough opening. I generally today would use the right kind of spray foam, but we used to use backer rod. Cantilevered floors need blocking. They need blocking on cantilever, especially over garages. Really important. Blocking. Knee walls is a great detail of an attic knee wall, showing blocking and showing added insulation and rigid board on the attic side.
Insulation doesn't stop air, blocking does.
The blocking does, that's right. It's calling it the right name. And then this is the right, probably, foam board to use behind an attic knee wall.
What material would you use? How about plastic?
For what?
Air.
The back of the attic knee wall?
Yeah.
I wouldn't use plastic. It's a vapor retarder, and if you used house wrap and it sealed it, I'd say, it could work, but it'd have to really be sealed. So we generally go with rigid foam board. That's the best bet, in my opinion. Yeah, Jerry? In Georgia, it is. The national code is still R13, but we think knee walls should be insulated better. And the people that write the national code were from a cold climate. And what do they go? No, that space is buffered. It's not that cold back there. It's like, it's not about it being cold. In Dallas, they call that wall the hot wall, which I love that name.
We use, in logistics, because of logistics, we use an R5.6 FSK foil-based insulation
Okay.
on the backside and then seal it.
I love it. I think that's brilliant. That's what I would do. Here, they put the foam board, but they didn't block. And my buddy has taken, this picture. That's a giant opening between the first and second floor, and it's just a huge hole. And that will fail a blower door test.
What Jerry mentioned too, the knee wall skylights. If you have skylights.
Skylight shaft is a knee wall.
Yes, and that material works real well because sometimes it's really tight on the backside, but with that flexible
Yep.
wrap.
I like your assembly. I think our 5.6 plus the 13 in the cavity, that's close to, I mean, that would pass code, and that's pretty good. Attic access, we talked about that already. There's a retrofit box you can make and all this stuff, but I like the things that come in sort of foolproof from the underside. I think we covered this about plastic, where you don't need it in the walls or ceiling, you need it in the floor. And the last couple things in here are all what's called mandatory requirements. You got to do them. Basically, things like put on a thermostat. The heat pump should only run in the heating, should never pull on the strip heat if the heat pump can keep up. So if it's 50 degrees outside, your heat pump ought to be able to heat the house. And leaky ducts kill heat pumps, by the way, so that's another consideration. R8, I think you know about that, is the duct insulation requirement. And actually, this is interesting. In the new code, it gets weaker. It's only R8 for supplies under this code. Everything else is R6. But in this code, it's R8 pretty much across the board. Probably overkill, honestly. You can use ducts for returns. We banned that in Georgia. So that's a suggestion, is don't ever use a cavity as a duct. You can run a duct in a cavity, but don't use drywall and wood as a duct. Pans and, yeah, bad idea. Okay, so there's a case where they put an air barrier up there. They ran the ducts inside. They'll put a finished ceiling underneath. They'll blow insulation on top. Great cheap way of getting the ducts inside the envelope. So nice little detail. Pipes need to be insulated. Dampers are required on exhaust. You know, load calcs have to be done. Equipment has to be sized. Ducts have to be sealed. Mastic and tape are both allowed. We prefer mastic. We require mastic in the Earthcraft program. And then the last little thing is that you can do a trade-off. You can get your nerd on and hire John is really what it is. I call it the hire John path. You get a HERS rater. They've got the software. It does a true simulation. It would much better model that home than what we just did with ResCheck. ResCheck simply borrows a little bit of insulation off of here and puts it over here. The simulation approach that John has the software to do looks at the whole enchilada. And so that's an easier way to sort of get more flexibility. And that is pretty much it. I think that's all I had. There are some nice little documents that you can get that are, we call it the code on a stick. The idea is, this is your code. Do what we say and everyone's happy. Build it this way and you're all good. So it's really one answer for this climate zone. I apologize I went about 5 minutes, 10 minutes long, but I will throw everything at you in the kitchen sink. Does anybody have any questions? Would you mind flipping the light on behind you there? Anybody?